I'm excited to welcome you here today to the Jefferson Wells Digital Event Series, Real World Data Analytics, Thinking Outside the Box. We have a wonderful presentation for you, and I'm pleased to introduce our presenter. But before we get started with today's discussion, we have a few quick housekeeping items to cover. In order to ensure your best audio and visual quality, please listen through your computer by turning on your speakers after you log into the event. During your viewing experience today, please feel free to adjust your viewing screen by clicking on the 4-dot symbol in the upper right-hand corner. This webinar qualifies for 1 CPE credit. You must participate for 50 minutes of the webinar in order to be eligible for credit, and each participant must be logged into an individual desktop computer in order to track your participation. There will be a series of polling questions asked throughout today's session. Please take a moment to answer the polls when they are launched on your screen. They will be launched for approximately 60 seconds. We will be emailing CPE certificates to all qualifying attendees next week. Lastly, we'd love to hear from you during today's presentation. If you have any questions during the presentation, please submit them by clicking on the question mark icon to open your Q&A window. So to begin, I'd like to welcome our presenter for this session, Jay Smith. Jay?
Thank you, Salima. I'm thrilled to be here this afternoon to discuss data analytics with you all. As Salima said, my name is Jay Smith. I am a regional director of finance and accounting for the South Central region of the United States for Jefferson Wells. I have my undergraduate degree from Tulane University in finance and accounting, my graduate degree, my MBA, from the Darden School of Business at the University of Virginia, and I recently completed my 2 years of postgraduate work in data analytics from Harvard University. So, our agenda for today. What we're going to talk about first is we're going to go through just a basic definition of what data analytics is all about, as well as some other terms that are thrown around in this arena of the data sciences. We're also going to go further into depth into data types and also look at the different steps a typical data analytics project might entail. From there, we're going to go to some examples, some real world examples of maybe how the finance and accounting and audit world might use data analytics. And then we're going to delve into some out of the box uses as well as some nefarious uses that data analytics can be applied to. So what is data analytics? So I'm not going to read this, but you can see that data analytics is a science. It truly is a science and is built on advanced computer science and mathematical sciences, including probability and statistics. If any of you had probability and statistics in your college or post-college educational platform, you understand that this is very complicated and there's a lot of intricacies about this. It is the science of analyzing data. So what is data? Well, we're going to get into that, but data, it is a lot of times it is very raw, very unstructured, and comes from a variety of sources. It can be financial, or in a lot of cases that we're going to be talking about today, it can be also operational. So we use this science and we use the data in order to make conclusions about information. And some of the techniques and processes that we employ are algorithms that help us to automate these mechanical processes and work over our raw data for human consumption. So what is an algorithm? An algorithm is merely a set of rules to be followed in calculations or other problem-solving operations, especially in terms of a computer. So let's talk about the differences in terminology. We're going to go from a broader scope to a more specific scope. So when you hear the term big data, just think about the definition of those two words. It is high volume, it is high velocity or high variety information that really needs a cost-effective way to transfer it into something that is meaningful for us to understand and to gain insight from. From there, you go into the art of data science. And data science is that combination of statistics, mathematics, programming, different problem-solving techniques in order to get the information needed to make smart decisions. And you start paring that down even more into specific data analytics, which many would say is a subset of data science. What this is it involves applying an algorithmic or mechanical process to derive these insights. For instance, running through several sets of data to look for correlations between one another. Okay, so when you talk about data analytics, there's really four different kinds of data analytics. The first one and the most basic one is probably one that we've all seen. It is descriptive analytics. This is, your raw data that you take out of any number of your systems. It is summarized to describe what has happened in the past. It allows us to learn from our past behaviors and really gives us a photo or a snapshot of what might happen in the future, but there's no guarantee. So think about in your everyday life, think about a simple dashboard that has bar charts and graphs and stuff like that that describe stuff that happened in the past. The next step, or the more complicated method of this, would be the diagnostic analytics. And diagnostic analytics is really trying to answer the question, well, why did this happen? So it's enough that we have the past photo of what happened, but now we're trying to figure out, well, what is the root cause as to why this might have happened? It really helps us to develop deeper insights and understand the cause and effect of why something took place. It also typically gives us the ability to drill down in the data to find certain dependencies and really start the process of identifying patterns of data. The next one would be predictive analytics. So now we know what happened. Diagnostic is telling us why that happened. Predictive analytics allows us to use both of those to detect certain tendencies, clusters, expectations, what might happen in the future, okay? The accuracy is highly dependent on the quality of the data, and you will see as we go forward from descriptive to diagnostic to predictive to prescriptive analytics, the data becomes more and more important, and the cleaner and more refined that data is, the better off our analysis is going to be. So after we figure out what did happen, why it happened, what might happen, now prescriptive analytics really helps us to start simulate and optimize what data we are using in order to make even further predictions as to not only what might happen based on what we're currently measuring, but also what levers and buttons we might push and pull in order to really change our business.
All right. Well, thank you, Jay. Let's head over to the first polling question we have launching live here. And it reads, where does your organization currently stand in their use of data analytics? My goodness. One option is we haven't even thought about it. Two, we have looked at it, but we are still in the early stages. Our third option here is we are well on our way, but still trying to figure some stuff out. And the last option, we are masters at data analytics, and some creative options there. So please take a moment and go ahead and vote. Looks like we've got almost 90% in, so we'll give it just a few more seconds here, Jay. All right, we're going to go ahead and close our polling here, and let's take a peek at some of the results.
Okay, wow, look at that. So, very, very typical of what I would expect. Obviously, data analytics has gotten a lot of airtime as of recent. And I think that as data has become more prevalent and the tools have become easier to start using and to come by, really companies are taking a hard look at how they can use it to improve their operations. So it looks like we have, over 80, close to 90% that are either in their early stages or are well on their way. So that's fantastic. Thank you very much, Salima. Okay, so let's start looking at data types. So as I mentioned, my background is finance and accounting, investment banking, and so a lot of my world has been in numbers. Well, when you start expanding the scope into data analytics, you really need to look at the fact that we are measuring successes of business, not just on numbers, not just on financials, but on those items and those categories that might turn into financials. So we're going to look at two different types of data: categorical and quantitative. Quantitative is obviously going to be our numbers, but categorical is going to be those things that are not numerically challenged, at least in terms of money, dollars, et cetera. So the first type of categorical data would be the nominal. That is just that there's no inherent order in these categories. It could be eye color, it could be ethnicity, it could be a diagnosis, it could be a location, for instance, a zip code, a state, a city, um, anything like that. And really, the typical places that you're going to pick this up is going to be either in surveys or in electronic medical record keeping, so in the healthcare industry, as well as in census data. From there, as we start getting a little more complex, we go into ordinal categorical data. And this is, once again, non-financial, but this is categories that have an inherent order. For instance, a job grade. You could have an analyst 1 all the way up to an analyst 10. You could have an age group. I think we've all had to fill in the Scantron or whatnot that says you're between the ages of 11 to 20 or 21 to 30, 31 to 40, et cetera. It could be also satisfaction. So think about this in terms of an NPS score. If you work for a company that takes into account those kinds of KPIs, a lot of times you can find this stuff in HR statistics. And then a subset of the one above is really the binary, or it's also called the dichotomous. And what this is, it's a nominal data set, but it only has two outcomes. It could be gender in a lot of cases. It could be location. So sometimes companies are figuring out what to do, whether their stores or their operations are, for instance, north or south of the equator, but the binary is only two different options. And a lot of the binary data is going to be used and gained from retail sources. Okay, so now let's get into the quantitative data. And the two quantitative data sets are kind of interval and ratio. And when we look at what the two quantitative ones, the first one we'll look at is discrete. It's typically whole numbers. It may be the size of a household. It could be anything that has a whole number to it. And once again, this could come from the census data. But the most complex one to use is a quantitative continuous data type, okay? And this is taking any value into a range. For instance, it could be a temperature, it could be a height, weight, age, duration, it could be any sort of a ratio. And what we're gonna look at next is we're gonna see what each one of these allows us to do in the data analytics framework. So I told you that the nominal data, that could be, eye color, ethnicity, et cetera. That really is the simplest data set we can find. Now, it doesn't give us a whole lot of clarity into what we're trying to figure out, but it does allow us to look at counts, frequency of distribution, and from that, we can typically get a mode or the most likely member of that data set. From there, we go into the ordinal, okay? And that really is where, remember, the ordinal is where there is an inherent hierarchy to these data sets. So in this case, in addition to giving us counts, frequency of distribution, mode, it also allows us to really get the order of values, okay? So we can actually do a low to a high. And now we start really delving into the power of analytics. And it also allows us to get a median. From there, we go into the interval data, and it gives us everything as before, but it also allows us to give a mean, and we can actually quantify the difference between each value to determine, say, the bell curve as associated with this data set. And it allows us to add or subtract values in order to come up with conclusions. The one thing about interval data, though, is in in its definition, it really does not have what I would call a true zero. So at that point, it actually makes it impossible for us to multiply it and divide values. But that's where the ratio data comes in, okay? So you actually, in a ratio data, you can have a 0 degrees, for instance, treated as a hierarchical number in a temperature scale, whereas in interval you can't. So you can see as we go from nominal data to ordinal data to interval to ratio, you're able to do a lot more with it. Now, it probably goes without saying that the ease of coming up with this data also reflects the ability to get this data and do what you want with it. The ratio data tends to be much more complicated to get and a lot of times requires a lot more of the cleansing of that data to turn it from raw and unstructured into something that you can actually use. And this is something that you really want to pay attention to at the outset of a data analytics project, because this really is going to drive your end results. So, data collection. I'm going to give everyone just a couple of pointers here. So these are called the 4 V's, okay? And what I really want to do here is I really just want to paint the picture for you when we talk about data, because we hear about data. We know that there's YouTube videos and there's Instagram posts and there's emails and all that stuff. But I thought I'd just give you a couple quick statistics. So the first one being volume. It's important to note that 90% of the data that has been, 90% of today's data has been created in the last 2 years, and data is doubling about in that same time frame. So that gives you an idea of where we stand. And daily, this one was a surprise to me. Daily, we are creating 2.5 quintillion bytes of data, which is enough to fill 10 million Blu-ray discs. I'm not even sure if Blu-ray discs are around anymore, but if they were, you can fill 10 million of them per day. And to give you an idea what 2.5 quintillion is, a quintillion is a 1 followed by 18 zeros, okay? So we are creating 2.5 of those on a daily basis. So let's go to velocity, and that's our blue circle right there. Right now, the velocity of data worldwide is about 50,000 gigabytes per second. Okay, so every second of the day, approximately 72 hours of footage is uploaded to YouTube. Approximately 204 million emails are sent, and about 216,000 Instagram posts are made public, and that is every second. Okay, so we know we have a lot of volume of data. We know we have a lot of velocity. Let's talk about veracity of data. Veracity, how true is this data? Well, it is estimated to be $3.1 trillion is the amount of money that poor data quality is costing the US economy every year through bad decisions and having to go back for rework. 1 in 3 business leaders does not trust the information that they are using to make decision. 1 in 3. Think about those individuals that you know that are in powerful positions at company. And if you think about 33% of them do not trust the data that they are using, that tells you something right there. And lastly, let's talk about variety. 90% of the generated data is unstructured. I don't want to say it's dirty, but it is unstructured and it actually needs help in getting to a final usable format. That would be tweets, photos, purchase histories, customer service calls. And it's interesting to note that in this world of social media, 80% of data growth is in videos and images. So, what do we do with this data now? Let's go on to our steps for a data analytics project. Okay, so the first thing we do is we define a goal like we do when we start any major initiative, right? We're going to define the goal. What are we looking for? What are we trying to accomplish? A lot of times with that, we're going to go into who are the stakeholders here and really get to the meat of what we're trying to accomplish. Now, the second one seems pretty easy. We're going to get the data and then we're going to clean it, right? All you do is you download it from a system, you throw it in Excel, And you look at it, you make sure it looks okay. And in some cases, we go to the fourth step, which is enriching the data. So if there's incomplete data there, there's ways that we can go ahead and put traps and limits on that to really bring out the high points of that data. Sounds easy, right? Okay, so fine, we enrich the data now. And now what we do is we go and we try to run our algorithms and do our formulas and look at ProbStat, and we start finding insights and we start visualizing it. We throw it into Tableau, or we throw it into a chart or a dashboard. And then once we've determined that that algorithm or those tests are correct, what we're going to do is at that point, we're going to deploy machine learning, and we're going to do it over and over again so that we're getting real-time data back that we can actually do something with. Okay, easy enough, right? Well, let's go on to the next slide and we'll see where our time is spent. I want you to note that the two blue areas here, collecting the data and cleaning and organizing the data, take up almost 80% of the time for a data analytics project. Data analytics is a huge subject right now. There's many data scientists going to school to learn this, and I have a feeling that they all want to go and grab all this data and overnight turn it into something that is life-changing. It's going to change the world. It's going to double revenues. It's going to cut costs. It's going to increase margins. But I want you to note that 80% of the time on a data analytics project is merely collecting it and then figuring out what to do with it. Okay. After that, the modeling is less than 10% of the time. You refine some algorithms, you build the sets to do what if analysis. But I think that this is something that people don't always realize, is that the data that we have is so raw and so unstructured that it is very hard to do anything with it until we actually start employing some uses of it that really allow us to make sense of what we're looking at.
Excellent. So as we move into polling question number 2 here, let's go ahead and launch that. What is your organization's biggest hurdle to have successful data analytics strategy? Option 1, the data itself. Option 2, the tools and systems. Option 3, the human component. Or D, all of the above. So it looks like we're actually having a great amount of voting come in here, and we're at about 80%.
And Salima, this one's going to be interesting because I have seen answers all over the board for this one. So I'll be very curious to see what we find out about this, because it depends. A lot of times I find out that, you know, one month it comes up as, you know, A, the next month it comes up as C, and then when times are really tough, it comes up as all of the above. So I'll be very curious.
Well, I don't want to spoil the surprise for you, but it does look like here. Let's go ahead and share the results. It is D, all of the above.
All of the above. Well, you know what? The good news is, okay, so the good news is the data itself, what I said was going to be a tough one, really is. And almost 20% of you all said that the data is going to be a tough part. The tools and systems, I can tell you that in addition to all of the great sessions we are doing as part of this virtual event, on Thursday afternoon, we will be doing another data analytics as it pertains to internal audit. And at that presentation, we will be going into some of the tools and systems. So if you're interested in learning more about those, tune in there. But these tools and systems are currently being created, but it's no big surprise that the majority of people said, yes, I need the data, I need the systems, I need the people, I need all of the above. Okay, so let's get into some real world examples here. So I at the very beginning, we talked about descriptive analytics. We talked about prescriptive, predictive, diagnostic, et cetera. So we're going to go into some just real world examples to help you think about what this means in your line of work. So like I said, descriptive is what happened. Think about dashboards that depict inventory, workflows, AR, AP, you know, DSO, customer counts, certain stakeholders, stuff like that. Really, the pro of descriptive analytics is, right, this simplifies large amounts of data and it reduces the data into simple summaries, okay? But as much of that is a pro, pro, it's also a con, okay? We cannot do a whole lot of verification or testing the research problem statistically, right? Because this is in the past. And without knowing what exactly caused some of this data, we really can't test what's going to happen in the future, okay? And also, this data, as simple as it is, it may reflect certain amounts of bias due to the absence of that statistical test. And for the most part, it's not repeatable due to its observational nature, right? Once again, we are taking a snapshot of the past, and there's no telling that if we did that same snapshot a month from now, it's going to be the same snapshot. So although this has many uses, this is the easiest one to accomplish, but it also gives you probably the least amount of insight into your business processes of any of them. Okay. So the next one, right? This was the why. This is the diagnostic analytics example. So we got our snapshot. Now we're saying, okay, well, what's causing this product to sell more? We took the snapshot and we saw that last month widgets sold twice as much as they did the month before. Well, this answers the question, well, why did they sell? It could be things as weather. It could be shelf height. It could be advertising. It could be seasonality. When you look at, for instance, weather, you look at a grocery chain and you look at the differences between how cold cereal, sugar puffs or whatever, sells versus oatmeal when the weather changes, and the change is astronomical. No surprise that shelf height affects this as well, right? The stuff right in your line of vision is probably what you're going to be gravitating towards because it's most convenient and it's top of mind right there. Advertising, et cetera, seasonality. Mittens are probably going to sell better in the winter months than in the summer months. And obviously locations are going to be different too. So the pros here, it helps us determine simply why something happened. Okay, it helps us determine that cause and effect relationship. And for the first time, it actually allows us to do some drill down capabilities to start looking at those inherent structures that have that cause and effect relationship. So we can actually start playing with stuff here. And it's not just the snapshot, but we can start going in and out and changing stuff to start determining why something happened. Okay, so now the cons, right? It doesn't tell us what might happen in the future. Yeah, sure, we can take some of those cause and effect relationships and we can speculate, but it really just gives us a backwards view of why something happened in the past. But this is the first point of trying to determine why something might happen in the future, which is going to take us to predictive analytics. So predictive analytics, I hope everybody likes my my graphic there of the tarot cards. Predictive analytics examples are car dealers trying to manage the loan approval process. So, they might be looking at insurance claims and driving records and saying, hey, if this is what's happened in the past, it's a pretty good indication that this might happen in the future. It can also, when we're talking about operations, setting prices for future seasonality. Once again, when I look at, say, steel production or oil production, those are going to have seasonality factors depending on weather, building codes, et cetera. And a very famous one is health. So there was an app called the Google Flu Trends, which based what the flu tracking was going to be based on internet search results. Unfortunately, in that case, they were dealing with some bad data. And so what actually happened is it overestimated the flu trends by almost triple, almost sending us into a hysteria that obviously had to be put to sleep pretty quickly. So we didn't all make a run on toilet paper. Anyways, the pros of predictive analytics is it allows us to look into the future to enact change, and it helps us to mitigate risks. For the first time, we're able to look at those cause and effect and really push them forward to understand, well, if this happens, I need to be prepared for this. Okay. Now, the cons are now we're starting to get into some complex data sources, and we need a lot of data, right? We are staking business decisions now on something that we really want to be sure that we have right. So we need a lot of the data. We really need to put this through some complex calculations. And unfortunately, the data quickly outlives the usefulness, right? The more we change, the more our past start separating from our future. Okay, so that's why this has to be an iterative process. And so that's why algorithms and data analytics is so important, because it allows you to take what was normally a very manual process and turn it into a very prescripted process where it is doing a lot of the work behind the scenes in the background for you. And it really does take the next step beyond your business and looks at industry trends. So with that, let's go to the last one, which is the prescriptive analytics. And this is the sexy analytics right here. This is what companies are basing their decisions on. Think about transportation industry, monitoring and adjusting in real time based on traffic patterns and gas usage. Think about your delivery trucks that are actually updated in real time based on shipments, based on traffic patterns, where they are saying, hey, you were going to go to this zip code this afternoon. We need you to do it this morning because there is an outage that is scheduled there this afternoon. Okay. This is real time, up to the minute analytics. Okay. This is also client payment behavior. You score and adjust to customers' true payment history. Okay. And then there's also financial industry, right? This is measuring risks of trades in real time. If anybody there has a Bloomberg terminal, you know exactly what I'm talking about. This is up to the minute, up to the second financial industry information. And so what this really does, the pros here, this can help map a path to success. And I hope you realize it says map a path to success. This helps map a path to success, because if you haven't done all the other pieces right, this will not work for you. It also helps you spend less time thinking and more time doing, and it actually helps you to reduce human error. So here are the constraints. Or the cons, very complex, very, very complex. And a lot of times you have sparse input data because you are looking into the future, and you can only put in inputs that you have for in control situations. Okay, so let's go to some more of the nefarious uses, right? Right now, we're talking about everything that we can use data analytics to do to help us. But unfortunately, data analytics is being used for more sinister uses as well. So the first one is the deep fake. Okay, you may have heard deep fake. You're seeing a lot of the political manipulation, social harm. If you have the opportunity, I've posted a YouTube link right there. And what this is this is manipulating videos to have an individual make a statement. This video down here, this YouTube link, shows Obama giving a speech, and it is absolutely terrifying because they are able to put whatever words they want, have his mouth move in exactly the right cadence and everything. I can also tell you that during my studies, we studied an executive who he had his voice that was recorded by somebody else, and they were able to take the inflections in the voice. They were able to record it, send a very urgent message to their treasury personnel, ordering out a $200,000 payment to a vendor that was very upset without going through the normal processes and procedures. That was sent out. By the time they realized it, that money was all over the world and nothing could be done. I also want to tell you that during my studies, I had the opportunity, and this was fantastic, I had the opportunity to speak as a class to an expert on data analytics. And we had a 30-minute conversation with this individual, talking back and forth, asking questions, trying to gain insight, and really delving into their expertise, only to find out that after the fact that we were talking to a robot, and none of us knew this. So the deep fake is something that I think is going to become more prevalent as we move forward, unfortunately. Okay, so another nefarious analytics example is discrimination, and this can be intentional or unintentional. So a 2017 investigation showed that certain minority neighborhoods pay more for car insurance than non-minority neighborhoods, even though they have the same risk levels. This was an unintentional consequence, but it shows that if you do not know what the data you're looking at entails and you do not use it in the right manner, it is going to have unintended consequences that's going to have a trickle down use throughout the economy. Okay, so You're seeing more and more of this, and that is why in the the science of data analytics, it is more important than ever to really pay attention from an ethical standpoint as to what you are doing and what you are trying to accomplish. The last one is the misuse of personal information. You know, the voice I talked about, that was a clear misuse of personal information, or at least personal voice activated approvals. But you find credit card companies are using personal information such as where people shop or whether they are going through marriage counseling to set rates and limits. So what this is termed as is the creditworthiness by association. If they see that perhaps you have a credit card bill that shows marriage counseling, you are finding credit card companies saying, you know what, something must be brewing here. This may not be good, and maybe this person or this family may not be worth giving credit limits to. It also showed a study that details the case of a man who found his credit rating lowered by American Express, not based on any other factors, but where he shops, because others that shopped at the same place had a poor repayment history. Now that's scary, but there's an even scarier case. Next slide, please. Okay, here we go. This, in my opinion, is perhaps the scariest example. If you all are familiar, we're going to talk real quick about China's social credit score. And what this is a score given to an individual from 600 to 1300 based on 1,000 separate variables over 5 different data sets. It is run not only at a state level, but also at a commercial level. If you are given a penalty, it's done at the state level. If you are given a perk or a benefit, it's typically done at the commercial level. There are certain negative behaviors. So I'll let you read those, but you know, quarreling with a neighbor. Imagine if somebody turns you in for quarreling with a neighbor, or playing your music too loud, or if you order takeout food and you fail to pick it up, or the last one, failure to visit elderly family. And they're in the green box under penalty. You know, they may deny you mortgage. Your kids can be banned from being admitted to certain the good schools, if you will. It can prohibit luxury purchases. So in a nation that really gets by on a lot of train travel, it can prohibit you from not only not buying a first class ticket, but not buying a ticket on a train at all. It can limit your internet speeds, hiring decisions. It can even have your pets taken away from you. There is a story of a gentleman who is a news reporter. I want to say it was news or magazine, and he was traveling on business and forgot a payment. And lo and behold, now he is stranded out of town without a way to get back because he was not allowed to buy a plane or a train ticket without getting this taken care of first. But the good news is, if you exhibit positive behavior like giving blood or maybe doing volunteer or charity work, helping the poor. I love this one, praising the government on social media, acts of heroism, taking care of the elderly, or positively influence the neighborhood. These are things you can get: lower interest rates, no waiting in lines, or if you go to the doctor, you may have a special room where you can wait in line so you don't have to wait with the riffraff, if you will. You can have fewer inspections and audits. You can also have fast track approvals. It's interesting right now in Beijing, they have certain face recognition capabilities now that if you are crossing the street and it recognizes your face, it can link it up with your social credit score, and the billboards around that square will light up with your face and the certain areas that you have violated. Okay, so this is very much also an intimidation by association, because maybe I don't have a good credit score, but maybe you do. Your credit score can be taken down by just speaking to me. Or if you were to give me a call on the phone, before it lets the two of us talk, it will actually remind you to ask me about my credit score and how I can go ahead and raise it to benefit the entire society. So here you go. This is obviously a very far-fetched area, but it is happening right now. I suggest you go do some research and read on it, because it is scary, but it is absolutely fascinating. So I think we are ready for our next polling question.
That is some interesting results and facts that you're presenting here. It's fascinating even for me over here. So here we go into our next poll question. Where do you envision data analytics could be the most useful for your organization? Researching what happened in the past, delving into why something happened, taking drivers to enact change in the existing structure, or simulation and optimization to create a new path going forward. So we're already over 50% voted. We'll keep this open here for a few more seconds as we keep going. All right, Jay, here we go with the results.
Okay, let's see it. Okay, this is exactly what I expected, right? A lot of us know what happened in the past. Of course, it could always be more useful. Delving into why something happened, really where we want to get to is the optimization to create a new path going forward. So it's great to see that stair step because it really mimics kind of the importance of data analytics in each stage of these, right? The what happened was the descriptive, you have diagnostic, predictive, and then prescriptive being the follow one. So this is a perfect representation. Thank you all for making me look good. Okay, let's go on to the next one. Okay, so I want to get, so we've talked about dashboards, we've talked about retail sales, we've talked about all this. I want to talk about some out of the box uses because I want to challenge you to start looking at your business and walking around and looking at what data might be used for around you in everyday life. So the first one, hey, wine selection. So if you're like me, you go to the store, you're looking at wine there, you know generally what you want, but what data analytics is now being used for is it's really artificial intelligence, if there is such a thing. You know, we'll just call it data analytics meets chemistry to investigate the relationship between the chemical compounds and the relevant expression on the human palate. So they now have kiosks that allow you to put in what wines you've enjoyed, what you think you like, acidity, sweetness, you know, dryness, whatever. And what it is actually led to is it's led to a 45% increase in purchaser happiness. Okay, so you know what? That is great if you know what kind of wine you like, right? Well, here's the one I like, label analytics. Turns out a lot of people buy wine just because of the pretty label. And what they're able to do now is they're able to mock up different labels and put them through a data analytics protocol to try to figure out what label is going to speak to buyers straight off the shelf. So this is just yet another ploy to drive sales. And they also offer kiosks that have shown that there is a 5 to 10 times return on the investment in these kiosks in order to help retailers manage inventory. So it's starting to predict what is going to be good and palatable in the future. Okay, so the next area, sports. Okay, I know a lot of you all have seen the movie Moneyball. Moneyball was the act of using statistics to buy undervalued and sell undervalued players and selling overvalued players. And what this did is it led to the Oakland A's using in-game statistics to identify undervalued players, and they won 20 consecutive games in 2002 with very little star power. So they were able to really look at the statistics and figure out what each individual of the team was going to be able to do based on the strengths and weaknesses of other players. And they were able to almost take a last ditch effort and form a team around that skill. This is nothing new, right? This is 18 years old now. So this has been used going forward. And I would challenge you, if you have the time, go and look at what data analytics is doing for the basketball, the sport of basketball. It is absolutely fascinating. And lastly, everybody's heard of autonomous cars, right? We're talking about the Google car that can drive you and whatnot. The idea of having a car that drives you and knows how to get around and knows how to avoid accidents and all all that, it is estimated to save approximately 600,000 lives by 2045. The big question out there is, when is this going to be available? And the experts out there, they have all different sorts of ideas of when this is: 10 years from now, 30 years from now, 50 years from now. But once again, when you start talking about unintended consequences, let's think about it. It's also estimated that over 5 million truckers and cab drivers will be put out of work. And if you think about it, what this also does is this creates a new moral dilemma that could have staggering effects across multiple industries. So what I mean by that is, now a car is going to have to make a decision that you have a car and you alone are in this car, and for whatever reason, the car is out of control. It now has to make a decision whether to careen out of control and take out a group of 5 individuals on a sidewalk, or hit a wall, killing you and you alone, okay? So obviously, this has some interesting risk mitigation issues associated with this. And you can imagine that this is going to have great effects on not only the automotive industry, but think about the insurance industry, and how quickly are people going to adopt, knowing that they may be completely out of control with what happens to them. So once again, some interesting things to look at. Okay. Now, here's my favorite one. This is my final example, and this is one of the best uses, in my opinion, of out-of-the-box analytics. Okay, so my professor by the name of Mark Glickman is an audiophile. He wanted to study the authorship of certain Beatles songs. So for those of you that are audiophiles as well, you will know that the original agreement with the Beatles was that the duo of John Lennon and Paul McCartney would take credit for each song written, no matter who actually wrote the song. However, after the breakup, each tried to clarify their contributions to the group, and in some cases, both individuals took credit of authorship. So you can imagine, when I'm sitting there in the classroom and Professor Glickman walks in with a guitar, I thought I was there for data analytics, but lo and behold, he's going to start playing songs. And these are what he was looking at. He was looking at chords, melodic notes, chord transitions, note transitions, contours, a lot of things that, quite frankly, I don't know about, but I appreciate the work that went into it. And I don't want you to think that this is just something that, you throw into a Excel spreadsheet or into a data analytics tool. If we go to the next slide, please. I'm going to show you that some of the calculations here, this takes into account some pretty serious calculus and differential equations here in order to come up with the coefficients and the statistics that give us an idea of who one song in particular, In My Life, was actually written by. So yeah, we don't need to go over this. This is way too complicated, but let's suffice it to say that not only were they looking at just how notes went up and down and how chords changed, but they also looked at the timelines of these songs, right? The Beatles had quite a long time that they were writing songs. So in this case, they took into account musical aspects, they took into account behavioral aspects over periods of time, and lo and behold, even drug use. Okay, so each of these individuals had a different ups and downs throughout this period that they were looking at. And so you can see that here over on the left, you can see some Lennon authored songs and the probability that McCartney actually wrote them. And it's 60% up to 94%. Now you look over at McCartney authored songs and the probability that Lennon wrote them. And so you can see it's very one-sided. But my only point here is that data analytics can be used for all sorts of stuff. And I would urge you, if you have a chance, go read this article. And normally my next slide would tell you who actually wrote the song In My Life, but I'm not going to do that. What I'm going to do instead is I'm going to challenge you to go read the article, figure out what actually happened. It's fascinating. It's very technical. And if you pull up a YouTube video, it's great to listen to all the technical issues that went into this, as well as the behavioral issues. So there you go. That is my last example of data analytics, thinking outside the box. So our last slide is just a quick summary. Okay, I've heard this, and maybe you have too, but data is the new oil. You heard me talk about the 4 V's, the volume, the veracity, all of that. Once it is processed, and it does have to be processed, remember, close to 80% of the time is spent on processing. Once it is processed, however, it is extremely valuable. It is ever changing as we are doubling the amount of data every 2 years. And it is going to continue to be collected on a wide scale. It can be used for both benefit as well as harm, as we've seen today. And please do not forget that it might have unintended consequences, okay? There will be new uses of data developing on a daily basis. If you go out there and do some searches on weird uses for data analytics, you will be amazed at the types of applications that data analytics has. And for good and bad, data and the results of data analysis will be key in businesses gaining new insight into their operations. And once again, it's not just going to be financial, it's going to impact all aspects from pre-sale to post-sale. It's going to impact all aspects of key business. The key here is figuring out how to get the data, how to clean it, what to look for, and how to get to the finish line. So, I want you just to keep in mind, please, that data analytics can be used for an entire host of insights, not just business and financial, but wine, basketball, and music. So with that, I sure do appreciate you all letting me take some time with you all today to talk about, obviously, a subject that is very near and dear to my heart. And with that, I would be happy to answer any questions that I can.
Perfect timing. So we've got just enough time for a few questions, and we had a few great questions actually come in, Jay. So let's take this first one here. Can you comment on type of problems descriptive analytics do not lend itself? Example, assessment and response to unknown risks.
Okay, can you read that one for me just so I get every piece of it back again?
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
We've got a few different questions as part of one question. So
okay.
Comment on types of problems descriptive analytics do not lend itself. For example, assessment and response to the unknown risks.
Yeah, so I mean, to put it simply, descriptive analytics is gonna be a snapshot. You aren't gonna have a lot of outliers running in descriptive analytics because it is so simple. It does not make way for a lot of unknown to get in there. Now, it's possible that the data you're using is dirty, if you will, or raw or unstructured, but you're really running that risk only once you get up to more of the prescriptive analytics, where the data is more complex. And in terms of just risk mitigation, yeah, I mean, I find the one thing that people really get wrong when they're doing analytics, not only just not converting the data or cleaning it up, but trying to get analytics to do something for you that it was not intended to do. Also trying to make the data speak to you in a way that it is not supposed to, okay? We get back to this. When you talk about descriptive analytics, you can make anything look like there is some sort of inherent correlation. But remember, in this case, correlation does not mean causation. And so luckily in data analytics, especially with the probability and statistics tool, you are actually able to start putting blinders on this data in order to flesh some of this out. I hope that attempted to answer the question. I apologize. I'm trying to get my head around all different parts of that.
Not to worry. So we've just actually had another question come in live right now. Can you recommend any good training or courses for data analytics beginning to intermediate, excuse me?
Okay, so what I would say, so there's a couple different pieces to that. So a good course, for those of you who are on our session today that are in, say, the accounting, the finance, probably everybody is used to using Excel. Excel is the simplest form of data analytics, right? You can still do what if scenarios. You can still do correlations, R-squareds, stuff like that. You can start putting in, some sort of lines that depict future behavior. Other than that, I think you need to figure out what you want. So there's different parts of this. There's the actual programming piece where you would use a tool like Python or R. or SQL. And then there's also the visualization aspect. So maybe you don't want to be a programmer, but maybe you want that data cleaned up and then you want to make something visually out of that. So at that point, I'd say go the Tableau route, okay? Figure out how to visualize it. Think about how to link up tables. Think about from a pure mathematics standpoint, what it means in terms of probability and statistics. So I guess my short answer is if you want to figure out what it means to do some at least beginner level data analysis, look at ProbStat, because that is going to be the first part that you're going to look at is mean, median, mode. You're going to start looking at your R squares, your correlations, and from there you can build on and decide if you want to go that IT programming route or if you want to go the visualization route.
Excellent. And I think we've got time for just one more question here that came a little bit earlier on in the presentation is, does correlation versus cause effect need to be addressed?
Yes. Yes, definitely. And that's a great point because I just made it. Thank you very much for that. Yes, I can make, with the right amount of data and the right amount of manipulation, I can make a lot of things correlate. And in fact, if you go out and you look at on Google, do some searches on some graphs where they will correlate the price of a biscotti to the worldwide oil index, and you will see, or whatever it might be, and you will see that the two go hand in hand. That's not a good example, but the examples out there are just as extreme. Just because something is correlated does not mean that one causes the other, right? When we talk about, the correlation of the trees moving and the wind blowing, yeah, they may be correlated, but the trees moving isn't what causes the wind to move, right? It's the exact opposite. So that always needs to be taken into account. And as you get into what I'd call medium level analytics, there are tools that help bind or blanket those different categories to make sure that you are getting rid of any sort of causation type of extremes, just to make sure that it's keeping you honest. So yes, you definitely have to worry about correlation not always causing causation. So.
Excellent. Well, we appreciate you taking the time at the end here. Again, we thank Jay Smith in your presentation today. We've gotten a lot of great reviews via the chat so far, as well as you'll be prompted a survey at the end of exiting this session. Please feel free to put your comments in there. Again, we thank you for joining our session today, and we look forward to the next. Have a great day.